television was once more than entertainment. It was a family event that shaped entire evenings. Before color sets brightened living rooms, black and white TVs sat like thrones and felt like technological wonders. The world looked different through that grainy gray screen, and daily life revolved around rigid programming schedules. So, let's take a journey back to a simpler, more magical time when watching TV was an experience kids today can hardly imagine. TV test patterns were your alarm clock. Do you remember waking up early on a Saturday, eager for cartoons, only to find the test pattern staring back at you? Before television stations broadcast around the clock, they signed off around midnight and didn't return until 6 or 7 in the morning, which meant early risers were often greeted by the Indian head test pattern, or even pure static. That test pattern wasn't just a placeholder, it had a real purpose. Technicians and viewers used its geometric circles, grids, and that iconic Native American head to align their sets, center the picture, and fine-tune the quality. A high-pitched tone usually accompanied it, droning on like an endless beep that filled the room. Kids would sit cross-legged in pajamas, watching that motionless pattern and waiting for the moment it finally clicked over to real programming. In a strange way, it was a lesson in patience. At least, that's what parents like to claim. Today, with 24-hour channels, on-demand options, and streaming services that never pause, the idea of a test pattern feels almost prehistoric. But back then, it was simply part of the rhythm of television life. A quiet, strangely comforting signal that a new day of cartoons and shows was just minutes away. Families dressed up to watch television. This might sound unbelievable to anyone born after 1980, but in the early days of television, families sometimes dressed up just to watch TV in their own living rooms. When televisions first arrived in American households in the late 1940s and early 1950s, the new medium was considered a sophisticated luxury, something closer to attending the theater than simply relaxing at home. Because of that, people approached it with a level of formality that feels almost unimaginable today. Fathers often kept their ties and dress shirts on after dinner, mothers wore their nicer house dresses, and children were expected to be clean, tidy, and presentable before gathering around the set. For many families, watching television wasn't just a pastime, it was an event. Some households even had designated TV chairs, special seats reserved for certain members of the family, usually dad, but sometimes the oldest child, or the person who had saved up most to help buy the set. The living room became a sort of miniature theater, and the television, often housed in a polished wooden cabinet, was treated almost like a treasured piece of furniture. The idea was simple. If television was bringing culture, news, music, and entertainment directly into your home, then you want to receive it with a little dignity. Of course, this level of formality didn't last very long. As televisions became more common throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, people gradually loosened up. What began as a glamorous novelty soon became part of everyday life. Families stopped dressing up, kids sprawled on the floor in play clothes, and pajama time viewing became perfectly normal. By the time color TV became widespread, the idea of putting on your nicest clothes to watch a program already felt like ancient history. Still, there was a brief, fascinating moment when television held a sort of reverence, when simply switching it on felt special. Imagine telling kids today that they need to put on nice clothes before they can watch Netflix or YouTube. They'd think you were out of your mind. But in those early days, television was new enough, rare enough, and magical enough to command that kind of respect. TV repair was a legitimate career. Before color TV, and certainly long before flat screens and digital technology, televisions were complicated machines packed with vacuum tubes, capacitors, resistors, and dozens of fragile components that could, and often did, fail without warning. That's why TV repairmen were essential figures in every neighborhood during the 1950s and early 1960s. When your television stopped working, and it happened far more frequently than people today might imagine, you didn't toss it out and buy a new one. Instead, you called the TV repairman, who would arrive at your home carrying a heavy toolbox filled with spare tubes, testers, and specialized tools. These men were like doctors making house calls for your entertainment center. Once inside, the repairman would pull off the back panel of your giant wooden console and begin removing vacuum tubes one at a time, testing each one on a diagnostic machine to identify the culprit. Many drugstores and hardware stores even had public tube testing stations, so families could bring in their own tubes to check them before calling in help. TV repair was such a reliable and respected trade that many young men attended technical schools specifically to learn it, knowing there would always be demand. Repairs could take anywhere from a few minutes to several hours. Families often sat nearby, watching nervously as the repairman tinkered with wires and glowing tubes, hoping to hear that familiar hum and see the picture flicker back to life. Getting the TV fixed wasn't just about convenience, it restored the center of the household's entertainment and often its evening routine. It was a completely different relationship with technology, one built on maintenance and repair rather than replacement. Televisions were expensive, long-lasting investments, and when something went wrong, you fixed it. That sense of craftsmanship and the neighborhood repairman who kept it all running was an important part of early television culture that has almost entirely vanished today. You had to warm up the TV before watching kids. Today have no concept of waiting for technology. They tap a screen and instantly have access to millions of videos and shows. But back in the days before color TV, you had to warm up your television set before you could watch anything. That's right, when you turned on your TV in the 1950s, you didn't immediately get a picture. Instead, you'd flip that heavy switch or turn that big dial, and then you'd hear a humming sound coming from inside the set. The vacuum tubes inside needed time to heat up before they could produce an image. So, you'd sit there staring at a blank screen for anywhere from 30 seconds to a full minute, or sometimes even longer if your TV was old. First, you'd see a tiny dot of light appear in the center of the screen. Then that dot would slowly expand until it filled the screen with an image. The sound usually came on before the picture did, so you might hear the audio of whatever program was on while still looking at that glowing dot. This warm-up period was just part of the routine. You'd turn on the TV and then go do something else for a minute, maybe grab a snack or adjust the antenna, or just sit there and wait patiently. There was something almost ceremonial about it, like you were coaxing the television to life. Once everything was warmed up and working, you knew you were in for a good evening of entertainment. The TV furniture was more important than the television sets in the 1950s weren't just electronic devices. They were pieces of furniture, and often very expensive and very important pieces of furniture at that. Most families didn't have a TV that sat on a stand or hung on a wall like today. Instead, they had what was called a console television, which was a massive wooden cabinet that housed a relatively small screen. These consoles were works of craftsmanship. They had beautiful wood finishes, intricate details, and often additional features like built-in record players or storage for vinyl albums. The TV screen itself might only be 14 or 17 inches, but the entire console could be 4 or 5 feet wide and 3 feet tall. It was a major piece of furniture that you planned your living room around. Families would show off their TV console to guests with the same pride they'd show off a nice dining room table or a new sofa. The wood had to match the rest of the furniture in the room. Some consoles even had doors that would close over the screen when the TV wasn't in use, so it looked like a regular piece of furniture. You dust it, polish it, and take care of it just like any other important household item. The screen was almost secondary to the overall piece. Nowadays, we hide our technology or try to make it as sleek and invisible as possible. But back then, your TV was a statement piece that told visitors you were modern and successful. Tinfoil on the rabbit ears was normal. If you didn't live through the era of black and white TV, you might not believe that people actually put aluminum foil on their TV antennas. But it's absolutely true. Those rabbit ear antennas, those V-shaped metal rods that stuck up from the top of your TV set, were how you received broadcast signals before cable existed. The problem was that reception could be terrible, depending on where you lived, how far you were from the broadcast towers, and even what the weather was like. So families developed all sorts of creative solutions to improve their TV reception. And one of the most popular was wrapping aluminum foil around the ends of the rabbit ears. The theory was that the foil would help capture more of the signal, and sometimes it actually worked, or at least we thought it did. You'd see TVs all across America with these makeshift foil extensions on their antennas, looking ridiculous, but nobody cared, because if it meant you could watch your favorite show without too much static, it was worth it. People would also attach coat hangers to the antenna or position the rabbit ears in weird configurations that seemed to defy logic. You'd have one antenna pointing straight up and the other bent at a 45-degree angle to the left, because that was the only way to get Channel 7 to come in clearly. And heaven forbid someone walk past the TV while a show was on, because that could disrupt the signal and you'd have to readjust everything all over again. There was only one TV per household. This fact might be the hardest one for modern kids to understand, because today most households have multiple TVs, plus tablets, computers, smartphones, and other devices that can stream video content. But back in the 1950s and early 1960s, most families had exactly one television set, and that was it. TV sets were expensive, really expensive. A decent console television in the mid-1950s could cost $300 to $500, which doesn't sound like much until you realize that was equivalent to several $1,000s in today's money. So, families saved up for their one TV, and that single TV had to serve everyone's viewing needs. This meant that what you watched was a family decision. If Dad wanted to watch the news, then everyone watched the news. If Mom wanted to watch her favorite drama series, then that's what was on. Kids had to wait for their cartoons on Saturday morning, or maybe catch some shows after school if they got home before the parents decided what to watch. There was no going to your room to watch your own shows because there was no TV in your room. The television was a shared resource located in a central space, usually the living room where the entire family gathered. This actually created a different kind of family dynamic where everyone experienced the same entertainment together. You couldn't retreat to your own device. You had to be present and engage with whatever was on that single screen. Programming ended every night. Imagine turning on your TV tonight and finding out there's nothing to watch because all the stations have stopped broadcasting for the day. That's exactly what happened every single night before color TV became common. Television stations would sign off usually around midnight or 1 in the morning, sometimes earlier on weekdays. The schedule would end with the national anthem playing over an image of the American flag waving in the breeze. Then the screen would either go to static or show a test pattern for anyone who happened to still be awake with their TV on. There was no late-night programming, no overnight movies, no infomercials trying to sell you kitchen gadgets at 3 in the morning. When the station signed off, that was it until morning. This meant that if you were a night owl or worked an overnight shift, you had no television to watch during those hours. The idea of television being available around the clock wasn't even a consideration, because producing content was expensive, and broadcasters assumed most people were asleep anyway, so why bother staying on the air? The sign-off became a ritual in itself. Some stations had announcers who would wish viewers good night and remind them to turn off their sets. Others played patriotic music or showed inspirational messages. Then you'd hear that high-pitched tone of the test pattern and know it was time to turn off the TV and go to bed, because there was literally nothing else to watch until morning. Everyone watched the same shows. In today's world of infinite streaming options and personalized content recommendations, It's hard to imagine a time when everyone in America was watching the same handful of shows. But that's exactly what life was like before color TV. With only 3 major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, plus maybe a local PBS station, everyone was choosing from the same limited menu of programming. This meant that when a popular show aired the next day at school or at work, everyone had seen it and everyone could talk about it. There was a shared cultural experience that simply doesn't exist anymore. When Lucy Ricardo did something hilarious on I Love Lucy, the entire nation saw it at the same time and laughed together. When something dramatic happened on Gunsmoke or The Twilight Zone, everyone experienced that moment simultaneously. Water cooler conversations the next morning were all about what happened on TV the night before, because you could assume that most people had watched the same things you did. There was no need to worry about spoilers because everyone saw everything as it aired. You couldn't record shows to watch later. You couldn't stream them on demand. You either watched them when they aired or you missed them completely. This created a kind of unity in American culture. The most popular shows could draw 60 or 70% of all. Viewers and entire families would schedule their evenings around when their favorite programs were on. It was a completely different relationship, with media one that was communal rather than individualized. TV dinners were a revolutionary concept. The invention of the TV dinner in 1953 by C.A. Swanson and Sons was directly tied to the rise of television in American homes. Before this, families ate dinner together at the dining room table every single night. It was a formal affair with everyone sitting down at the same time to share a meal and conversation. But as TV became more popular and must-see programming aired during dinner hours, the food industry saw an opportunity. TV dinners were frozen meals that came in aluminum trays divided into compartments. One for the main dish, one for vegetables, and one for a starch like mashed potatoes or corn. You'd heat the entire tray in the oven, and then you could eat it right from the tray while sitting in front of the television. No plates needed, no formal dining room required. This was revolutionary and also a little controversial. Some people thought eating in front of the TV was the beginning of the end of family values. They weren't entirely wrong, because it did change how families interacted during meal times. But for many Americans, especially busy working parents, the convenience was too good to pass up. Kids loved TV dinners because they felt special and modern. Plus, the meals were designed to appeal to children's tastes with things like fried chicken meatloaf and Salisbury steak. Families would set up TV trays, those folding metal stands in the living room, and everyone would balance their TV dinners on their laps while watching evening programming together. Horizontal and vertical hold. Knobs were essential. On the side or back of every black and white television set, you'd find 2 mysterious knobs labeled horizontal hold and vertical hold. These weren't optional features, they were absolutely essential to getting a watchable picture on your screen. The horizontal hold controlled whether your picture rolled sideways, and the vertical hold controlled whether it rolled up and down. When these settings got out of whack, your picture would literally roll across the screen over and over again, making it impossible to watch anything. This happened pretty regularly too. Maybe someone bumped the TV, maybe the broadcast signal was weak, maybe the tubes inside were starting to go bad. Whatever, the reason you'd suddenly find yourself staring at a picture that was tumbling sideways or flipping vertically like a slot machine. So you'd have to get up, walk over to the TV, and very carefully adjust these knobs until the picture stabilized. It was an art form, really. You couldn't just crank the knob to one side or the other. You had to find that sweet spot through tiny adjustments, turning it just a hair in one direction, then waiting to see if the picture would hold. Family members became experts at this. Dad might have the magic touch for the horizontal hold, while Mom was better at fixing the vertical. Kids learned early on not to touch those knobs unless absolutely necessary, because if you messed up the settings, it could take ages to get them back to normal. The fact that you had to manually adjust your picture just to watch TV is something that seems absolutely primitive now, but back then it was just another part of the television viewing experience. Changing channels was exercised before remote controls became common in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Changing the channel on your TV meant getting up off the couch, walking over to the set, and manually turning a dial. This dial was usually stiff and required some force to turn, especially on older TVs. Most sets had a VHF dial for channels 2 through 13 and a separate UHF dial for the higher numbered channels, though many families never bothered with UHF because the reception was usually terrible. The clicking sound the dial made as you turned it is something that's hard to forget. Each channel had its own distinct click, and you could almost feel the mechanism inside catching and holding at each position. If you wanted to check what was on all 3 or 4 available channels, you had to get up and turn that dial 3 or 4 times. There was no channel surfing like we know it today, where you can flip through hundreds of channels with the press of a button. Instead, watching TV required physical engagement with the device. And here's where birth order became important. In many families, the youngest child often got designated as the official channel changer. You'd be sitting on the couch watching TV, and Dad would say, "Change it to channel 7," and the youngest kid would have to get up and turn the dial. You were basically a human remote control. Some clever families positioned a chair near the TV, so the designated channel changer could sit there and switch between shows during commercial breaks without having to get up and down repeatedly. TV guides were must-have reading material. In the era before color TV, and certainly before electronic program guides and streaming menus, there was only one way to know what was going to be on television. You had to consult your TV guide. TV Guide magazine, first published in 1953, became one of the most widely circulated publications in America. Every household that owned a television also owned a current copy of TV Guide. It was a small digest-sized magazine that came out weekly and contained the complete programming schedule for all available channels in your area. The magazine would arrive in your mailbox, or you'd pick it up at the corner store, and immediately you'd start planning your viewing week. You'd flip through the pages with a pencil in hand, marking the shows you wanted to watch. Some people took this very seriously, maintaining detailed viewing schedules and making sure there were no conflicts when 2 good shows aired at the same time. TV Guide wasn't just listings, though. It also had feature articles about popular shows, interviews with television stars behind the scenes, stories and predictions about upcoming trends in television. The cover of TV Guide was a big deal too. If your favorite show or actor appeared on the cover, it was a sign that they had really made it big. Families would keep old issues of TV Guide around for reference even after the week had passed. You'd have a stack of them on the coffee table or near the TV console. The magazine became such an institution that it continued publishing for decades, even after the information it provided became available through other means. Cigarette commercials were everywhere. If you watch old black and white television shows or recordings from that era, one of the most shocking things you'll notice is the sheer number of cigarette commercials. Before cigarette advertising was banned from television in 1971, tobacco companies were some of the biggest sponsors of TV programming. Cigarette ads weren't just frequent, they were often integrated directly into the shows themselves. You'd be watching a variety show, and the host would take a break to light up a cigarette and talk about how smooth and satisfying it was. Many shows had cigarette brands as their primary sponsors, and the show's title would include the cigarette name. It was normal to see doctors in commercials recommending certain brands of cigarettes for their smoothness or suggesting that smoking could even be good for your health. The Flintstones, which was a primetime show before it became a children's cartoon, even had Winston cigarettes as a sponsor. Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble appeared in commercials smoking Winstons and talking about how great they tasted. This seems absolutely insane by today's standards, but back then nobody questioned it. Smoking was glamorous, sophisticated, and everywhere you looked on TV. The Marlboro Man, the Lucky Strike hit, Parade the Camel commercials with their cartoon characters. These were fixtures of the television landscape that everyone knew. The ban on cigarette advertising in 1971 was actually quite controversial at the time, because these commercials were such a huge part of television's revenue stream. The entire family watched together. One of the most significant differences between life before color TV and today was that television was almost always a family activity. With only one TV in the house located in the central living area, there was no such thing as everyone going to their separate rooms to watch their own shows. When the TV was on, the family was together. This created a shared experience that shaped how people related to each other and to the culture around them. Parents and children watched the same programs, laughed at the same jokes, and got scared by the same scary moments. Shows were designed with this in mind too. Programmers knew they had to create content that would appeal to multiple generations simultaneously. That's why so many shows from the 1950s and early 60s had a wholesome quality that made them suitable for family viewing. There were no parental controls, no separate kids programming, streaming on tablets, no headphones isolating family members from each other. Everyone watched together, and everyone talked about what they were watching during commercial breaks or after the show ended. Grandparents would come over on Sunday nights to watch Ed Sullivan's show with the whole family. Neighbors might drop by to watch a special program together. Television brought people together in a physical space in a way that just doesn't happen anymore. Sure, families today might watch shows together occasionally, but it's not the default experience the way it was back then. You couldn't record or pause anything. This might be the single most difficult concept for younger generations to grasp. In today's world of DVRs, streaming services, and on-demand content, you can watch anything you want whenever you want. But before color TV, and for many years after people had absolutely no way to record television programs, if you weren't sitting in front of your TV when your favorite show aired, you missed it completely. There was no recording it to watch later, no pausing it to go to the bathroom, no rewinding to catch something you didn't hear. Television was live and immediate, even when the shows themselves were pre-recorded. This meant your life revolved around the TV schedule. If your favorite show aired at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, then you needed to be home and in front of your TV at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night. If you had to work late or had other plans, you were out of luck. You might catch a rerun in the summer months when networks would replay popular episodes, but that was your only second chance. This made television events even more special. When something big was going to air, everyone made plans around it. Schools would schedule around major events like space launches or important presidential addresses. Families would arrange their dinner times to make sure they could watch their favorite programs. The concept of appointment television wasn't just a marketing term, it was a reality of life. You made an appointment with your TV and you kept it, or you missed out completely. Snow and static were part of the experience. Perfect picture quality is something viewers take for granted today. But during the era of black and white television, you were fortunate to get a clear image at all. Snow, the grainy, speckled interference that made the screen look like a miniature blizzard, was a regular part of watching TV. Depending on where you lived, how far you were from the broadcast towers, the weather, and the condition of your antenna, you might deal with snow all the time, or only during certain programs. Static was just as common. Crackling and popping sounds would drift from the speaker, especially during thunderstorms, or when atmospheric conditions disrupted the signal. Sometimes the picture looked fine, but the audio was filled with static. Other times the sound was clear, while the picture dissolved into horizontal lines, ghostly double images, or a fuzzy blur that barely resembled a show. People accepted a level of frustration that would be unthinkable today. Families would sit through entire programs squinting at snowy images and turning up the volume to hear dialogue through the crackle. And they rarely complained, because that was simply how television worked. If things got truly unwatchable, someone would stand up, walk over to the TV and start adjusting the antenna or fiddling with the horizontal and vertical hold knobs in hopes of coaxing the picture back into place. But a little bit of snow or a bit of static. That was normal, something you just lived with. The idea that someday you could turn on a television and instantly get a crystal clear, high-definition picture with perfect sound would have sounded like science fiction. Yet those imperfect images are part of what made early television so memorable. Even with all the interference, families gathered around the screen because the magic of TV far outweighed its flaws. Local programming was king. Before color television and long before national networks dominated the airwaves, local programming was at the heart of what people watched. Every city had its own stations producing homegrown shows, and these programs built strong, loyal followings within their communities. You'd see everything from local news and talent competitions to children's shows hosted by costume characters, cowboys, clowns, pirates, or friendly neighborhood, personalities who felt like part of the family. Local cooking programs featured regional dishes, local talk shows highlighted community events, and off-hour movie slots often had hosts who introduced old films with humor and charm. These hosts became beloved hometown celebrities. Kids in Boston adored Rex Trailer, children in Philadelphia grew up watching Chief Halftown, and Detroit had Milky the Clown, big stars in their cities but virtually unknown anywhere else. What made local programming so special was the sense of intimacy it created. It felt as though the television was speaking directly to your community, reflecting its traditions, humor, and values. When you traveled to another city and turned on the TV, the experience was completely different. New faces, new shows, and a distinct local flavor that reminded you just how unique each region was. This diversity in broadcasting helped shape local identity and gave each city its own cultural footprint. Today, that world has mostly faded. National networks, cable channels, and streaming services have standardized television so completely that people across the country often watch the same shows at the same time. While modern technology offers convenience and endless choices, the old days of local programming had a warmth and personal touch that's hard to replicate. It was a time when television wasn't just a national pastime. It was a neighborhood experience. TV antennas were neighborhood landmarks. If you drive through older neighborhoods today, you can still spot them on rooftops, rusting relics of another era. The big, elaborate TV antennas that defined the 1950s and 60s. Before cable or satellite, the only way to bring television into your home was through an antenna, and while rabbit ears worked fine if you lived close to the broadcast towers, serious viewers needed a rooftop model. These antennas were anything but subtle, huge metal structures 10 or 15 feet across, bristling with multiple elements angled toward different stations. Installing one was practically a construction project. A professional would climb onto your roof or set up a tall pole in your yard, bolt the antenna into place, and run thick cables into the house. Getting it positioned correctly was crucial. It had to point precisely toward the broadcast towers, and many families installed a motorized rotor so they could turn the antenna from inside the living room to improve reception on different channels. A rooftop antenna was more than just equipment. It was a statement that your family took television seriously. Entire neighborhoods were filled with these towering structures, creating skylines that looked like forests of metal branches. But they came with their challenges. Storms could twist or damage them, leaving everyone with fuzzy or unwatchable reception until the antenna could be repaired. Kids were warned not to play ball near the house, because one bad bounce meant an expensive fix. For many families, that giant rooftop antenna was both a point of pride and a constant reminder of how much effort it once took just to get a clear picture on your TV screen. Black and white made everything seem more serious. There's something undeniably powerful about black and white imagery. It has a way of making everything feel more serious, more important, and more rooted in memory than the same scenes would appear in color. News broadcasts carried extra authority. Dramas felt heavier and more intense, and even comedies seemed to have a subtle weight to them. Part of this effect is psychological. Black and white is linked to historic photographs, wartime footage, and the visual language of the past. But part of it was also practical. Black and white television required the viewer to actively imagine the world beyond what the screen could show. You had to fill in the missing colors, picture the leading lady's dress in vivid red, visualize a bright blue car cruising down a street, or imagine the warm glow of a lamp that appeared only as a pale shape on the screen. That tiny act of creativity made watching TV a more participatory experience. It was less passive, subtly more engaging, and somehow more personal. When color television became widespread in the mid to late 1960s, it truly was a revelation. Suddenly, the world on your set looked more like the world outside your window. Shows felt brighter, livelier, and more real. Yet, for all the excitement, something intangible faded. Television gained realism, but lost a bit of its mystery. The shift from black and white to color marked the closing of the medium's most innocent chapter, the era when simply seeing moving images at home still felt magical. For those who grew up with black and white TV, that old grayscale world holds a special kind of nostalgia. It wasn't better in a technical sense, but it had a charm that color can't replicate. Those pale images made even the simplest programs feel like events, as if history itself were unfolding on your living room screen. And while time has moved on, the memory of that softer, shadowy world still lingers, reminding us that sometimes the limits of a technology are exactly what make it feel so special. Life before color TV was a completely different experience, and while today's technology offers incredible convenience, a certain magic was lost along the way. Black and white television created a shared ritual for families. From waiting for the set to warm up, to adjusting rabbit ears wrapped in tin foil just to get a clearer picture, those limitations brought people together, turning every show into a small event and giving television a sense of ceremony that doesn't exist in an age of endless instant content. For those who grew up during that time, the memory of gathering around a single glowing screen remains powerful, a reminder of a slower, more connected era worth sharing with younger generations who will never experience television that way.